Holy understatements. This is Flight Check Season 2, Episode 15. We're back with a special episode for all of you, talking FlyQuest in all capacities. My name is Sandy Toes, and to my left, it's Curly QQ. To my bottom left tonight, Nox War, as always, and tonight our special guest on the show is FlyQuest General Manager Nick Phan. Nick, I'm coming to you first. How was your weekend? Do anything special?
I tweeted out I went to Topgolf yesterday.
Nice. Fun. Very good.
That's the first Topgolf opened up in Southern California, so it was really fun. I'm terrible at golf. I've been in the driving range a couple of times in my past, once or twice with Degon, I think. You can ask him about it.
Yeah.
He knows I'm terrible. But it was really fun. It's kind of like a mix between golf and bowling, and I'm terrible at both golf and bowling, but it was just fun to get points, and like you basically hit the ball with whatever club you want to use.
Yeah.
And there's different parts of the field that the balls would hit, and then if they drop into those rings, you get points, and then you compete with whoever you're there with. We were there with Michael, our COO, Greg, head of CLG, Mash, CLG assistant coach for the academy team, and a couple of other friends. So all in all, it was really fun. Also watched Fantastic Beasts. I don't know if anybody cares about Harry Potter or watches
was it good?
Or has watched the series. Better than the first two.
Okay.
But I don't know how much I love the series itself. I doubt they make another Fantastic Beasts, and then I think I was talking with Michael, and they probably end up doing like some sort of additional trilogy. I doubt they let the Harry Potter universe die.
Yeah.
Especially with that Harry Potter game coming out sometime in the near future. So, but it's not bad. It's not bad.
Totally. Yeah, there's a lot you can do with the Harry Potter IP for sure. Nox, you're on a bit of a brand new setup here. Nice clean camera and everything. So what's going on with you?
The girlfriend's gone for the night, so we upgraded. Let's go.
Stole the setup.
Stole the setup, and the result of stealing it is I only get one monitor working. But you know what? It's fine. It's better than what I normally
We take those, man.
We take those.
Exactly.
For sure.
Trade offer. Nox gets a setup, but one monitor.
Happens.
Compared to my one measly laptop, it's still an upgrade, so I'll happily take it.
Nice. Curly, how was your weekend? Did you watch LCS? I'm assuming you watched it.
Actually, I was talking to Nox about this because of how much I've been working to make sure I can be at LCS. I wasn't able to catch anything live, so all I have is Game 3 of EG versus C9. Because
that's all you need for that series, apparently. So.
Really, it is all you need for that series. And whew.
Yeah, that was a slaughter. Nick, are you going to be going to Houston just for kicks and giggles, or is anyone from the team going to be going?
I'm not. I'm going to be hanging back with the team here. We have, I think Trish is going.
Nice.
Michael, our CEO, is going. COO is going, and then I think Ricky's going to be there.
Nice.
And probably a couple other members of our marketing department. So
solid.
They'll be out in full effect. I think we're selling our playoff jersey there. So for people who haven't been able to get it through the website and you'll be in Houston, go ahead and check it out.
Excellent.
That is exactly where I plan to buy.
All three of us are heading to Houston. We bought tickets in the hope that we would be seeing FlyQuest play, on the finals weekend, but happy to be there anyway. So tonight we're going to be just discussing the LCS spring season in review, and then kind of talking about where the team is headed towards summer. Got a load up of questions ready to go. So we're just going to be...
Don't have to hit all of them. It was just...
Yeah, we'll just...
my stream of thoughts.
Yeah, just some nice talking points. And we'll just have a conversation, and we'll just see kind of where the show takes us. So Nox, I think, do you want to start us off with kind of your first thoughts?
The big thing is, the one thing you talked to us about last time you were on the show, right, Nick, was the main goal is this squad needs to make playoffs, and hey, man, you did it, and you did it in style. It was literally down to that last game, but that's all that matters, right? And so I I just how does it feel for you to make that goal? I guess
And
just to start it off.
I do have to issue a formal apology from the show for doubting, because we did have some doubts. But you proved us wrong. The team proved us wrong, and we do love to see that. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say hitting the goal feels good. I mean, it's a milestone that we set for our team. I think that it was more of an expectation rather than a if we achieve this, let's pop champagne and celebrate.
Yeah.
We knew we needed to be in playoffs because I think for us, as lofty as a goal as this might sound, our goal is to be as competitive as possible this year, with 2023 being the intention of we want to hit it hard and we want to make worlds, as best as we can in our position. So this split, next split, obviously it's playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So getting there is good. I think what we wanted to do was learn a little bit about our process getting there, and I think there's a lot of takeaways that we had, things that we're not quite happy about, but there's also things that, for resilience sake and in terms of understanding our own individual player development and their progression, I think there's a lot of things that we are happy about as well.
Totally.
So, kind of to follow up with that then, because a lot of the narratives, I don't know how in tune you are with like community sentiment and like how they're feeling about the team and whatnot, but it's been very interesting because like the whole split was just like, oh man, FlyQuest is just overperforming. They're actually not that good, so on and so forth. And then the moment they lose in playoffs to EG, it's like, oh, yep, that's what we expected. And I don't know, it feels kind of bad because it's like, I guess from your perspective, it's like you hit the expectations, but I think it's something that like fans should be very proud of. Like you guys made playoffs, you made improvements from a 9th place team to 5th place. That is a 4-spot improvement. That's huge. So I guess just how does it affect you guys at all, knowing about those narratives at all, or like does it bother you?
Not really. I mean, I would hope. I say this a lot to the guys, not only staff and but also players. It's just social media is like one of those tricky things that context is something that is not really part of the equation when narratives come up. So in terms of context, when they think about what we did to actually make it there, I think we're always going to be written off because we just don't have the star power that some people would attribute to a team that is supposed to do well. A lot of people, I think one example, Jose Dioto, I think when we signed him at the end of 2020, there were a lot of expectations for how good he and our roster were supposed to be. And I've talked at length, not only on your guys' show, but in other media platforms, that, the specific reasons for why our team didn't perform so well were, X, Y, and Z. And I think a lot of people take what happened in 2021 and created a narrative about how, Jose Dioto is maybe a paycheck stealer, riding off a performance from 2020 Worlds or just qualifying there to begin with, without looking at, one, I think the general level of play in Latin America. So like, what should your expectations be for a player coming from there? Two, I think progression and development for players generally isn't so linear. But I think because I have somewhat the philosophy that I'm okay with, the community, Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, wherever, to create their own narratives, I kind of allow and open the door for people to interpret what they think our players should be or where they think our team should be. So, for example, when we brought in Jose, I was excited about his potential just from a mechanical standpoint. I think if you compare him to the junglers in our league, he's at least top 3, especially when he's on carries, right? I think when you think about his other strengths and weaknesses, for me, my interpretation for bringing him on was that in our system, when we look at where we want to be, 2022, 2023, there needed to be a track of development. And so we didn't necessarily expect him to come in and be Blabber 2.0 right off the bat. And I think that's what a lot of people expect when people import players, is that they have to be able to have tangible ROIs like off the bat. And that's just not what I view importing right now. Ultimately, we wanted to build a team that could be the best part of its best whole of its parts, and I think we are on the right track. And I think, of course, in 2023, we're probably going to look at changes because every team does, and you always want to take a look at where you can get better and what you need to do to get better. But right now, I think we're pretty happy with understanding where we need to go from here. And I think looking back at how people write us off and how people interpret our 5-1 start, that stuff is pretty unimportant. But I do think the learning lesson that every team goes through when you start off hot like that is how accountable do you keep the process from there. And I think that ultimately I can be rather transparent about this, is there was some complacency and we took our foot off the pedal. And I think especially when you have super weeks in the middle of a regular season, when you do poorly in a super week, it can change things pretty significantly. Because, I mean, we played, 3 weeks leading up to a super week? So 6 games. And then your super week is 50% of the games you've already played. So however you perform in a super week can drastically change what your placement or ranking is. If we just went the full, normal 9 weeks that we had back in, 2019, 2018, and you go kind of 2 by 2 by 2, I think the impact of the super week is felt less because you're not looking at the results in the same way.
It's just
you might
week.
You might argue it's it's only 1 game less by not having a super week, but it changes because it's just all visual. You're looking at the results pretty visually, and it's there. And then, so not only did we have that slide, but I think we also entered remote play after we had some positive tests. I think we feel like they were probably false positives. We had both individuals that tested positive test again in subsequent days, and they're pretty much all negative tests. So unfortunately, that impacted us because I know Riot has to play it safe and they have to stand by their protocol, but we ended up having to play 2 weeks remotely, and I think that affects players in different ways. I think especially with young players, it does change kind of the, your audience and your motivation and things like that.
Does the remote play, because I think one of the narratives that was talked about definitely during the 2020 season and a lot of last season as well was, even though it was technically stage games, they still felt like scrims, right? Because you were sitting at home, you weren't actually on stage, no audience, things like that. So was it, when you say affected things, did it feel like, was it tougher for the guys to take it as seriously because they were still back in the office, or was it just
so that specific weekend where 2 guys tested positive on that Saturday, it ended up being just myself, Sharks, and the players coming back to our office to play. So right off the bat, we didn't have our second coach. And then the next day, Sharks had gone under food poisoning, and so both coaches were now coaching remotely. And so on the second day of that weekend, it was just me and our players. So people underestimate how much that can affect the atmosphere in a room by losing one person. And then when you're without both your coaches, you're still in a Discord call and you can still make those things work. And I think that's where a lot of preparation, both through draft and mental preparation, plays a big role. But coming from 2 years of COVID where stage play was really hard to come by for most people, unless you were at Worlds, I think it affects teams pretty significantly to have to, go from playing on stage even without an audience to all of a sudden I'm just coming into the office and leaving just like, a regular day of practice. And so the hype is not there. The energy that you would normally have on a stage day is not there. And I think nerves, although they can be kind of detrimental if there's too much nerves, that the small amount of nerves that you get from going on stage, that can channel into good energy. And when you're missing that, sometimes it's hard to have the same voice or have the same urgency that you normally would in a regular game. So I don't want to make excuses for our players, but I do think that those are factors that play into, what kind of floor you come into the day with or what kind of ceiling you might come into the day with.
Totally. Yeah, brief follow-up on that is, so now that you had those 2 weeks of the remote play, have you guys re-examined how you approach, if that scenario were to happen again, hopefully never, but if it were to happen again, have you guys re-examined how you would approach it?
I don't think it's a matter of physical environment. Like, I'm not gonna go in and like, now we have to rearrange our room to make it feel like we're in a stage match. I think most of what it comes down to, and we've talked about this with our players, is I think when we come into summer, there's probably going to be more of an emphasis in discussing at the top of the day or end of the day, what kind of things we need to focus on when it comes to non-in-game things, and how to have the right approach for, situations like that.
Totally.
I think other than that, it's like really hard to pinpoint like one or two changes that you can make to really prepare yourself. It's kind of like a competitor's mentality. You just have to take the punches and just understand you have a job to do. And I think as our guys get more experience with that, we'll be in fine shape.
Cool.
So you mentioned summer and like preparing for that, and that actually brings us to kind of our last point with the LCSs, because even with these 2 weeks in the office, with the Super Week not going too well, you still ended up in 5th place for the spring and had a pretty strong finish. So what does that bring for your expectations over the summer for the squad?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look back at our performances in summer, I think it was deserved, but we're also lucky to have finished in 5th place. I think there were probably like 3 or 4 games that could have gone the other way. Just as much as I think there are 3 or 4 games that we actually had footholds in that we could have won, and we just mis-executed a couple of small things, and it ballooned into bigger things. And as we get more reps and as we get more experience with how to close out games or how to navigate through the mid game, our younger players or more inexperienced players, they will figure out how to stabilize much quicker. One of the things that you saw last year, for example, we had a really hard time with losing gracefully. So like if you fall behind, knowing how to like allow some of the losses to kind of, creep up slower, rather than just kind of like, okay, well, now we're in a desperate situation, we just kind of have to ram our heads into a wall. I think that's something that Zach has brought a lot of composure in, and I think also Jose has actually developed tremendously in. I think the kind of player he was last year versus the kind of leader he is in game this year is like night and day. And so when you have that kind of development in a short amount of time for your team, and I'm not saying Zach developed, but bringing that stability and bringing that composure, I think it bodes really well for us in the future.
Totally.
Well, I mean, Zach helps develop the team. He's not development.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about toucouille. So he made All-Pro, absolutely massive in his first LCS split. And, I mean, played in LFL, but, first, like, big region split and makes All-Pro. I think for us, as the show, and I think for the FlyQuest fan community, he has exceeded expectations. He has absolutely, for us, was the MVP of the team for the spring split. He looked so good in so many scenarios. I still think about that his Vigar play against 100 Thieves that first game.
Yeah.
Still think about that moment. And I if you could just speak to like what he has brought to the team so far this spring, and where you're hoping to see him go for summer.
Yeah, I think players like him are really valuable to have. So for one, as an individual, he's just one of the purest-hearted individuals I've come across in esports. And I think that's a double-edged sword. The reason why I say that is because I think it's really good when you have the right atmosphere, and I think when you don't have the right atmosphere and you allow like too much personality clashing, I think his kind of personality doesn't always hold up as well as it can. I think we do a pretty good job in making sure players feel as supported as possible, but I think we can do better in the future. But ultimately, I think his pure-heartedness, I think it does a lot for not just their teammates, but also the coaching staff. I think, being able to develop a genuine line of respect between two people is something that's hard to do in any team. I think people don't realize this, but in esports especially, it's really easy to lose a locker room. It only takes like 3 or 4 bad drafts on stage. It's really quick. And part of that is, ego. The other part of that is everybody's like desperate to find like the immediate band-aid solution to, right the ship from winning to losing. And I think the right boundaries and the right relationships are pretty crucial in making sure that we're not so predicated on those like 3 or 4 wins or those 3 or 4 losses. Because I think at the end of the day, especially in our position, we have to get better over the course of every week. And so if we are so tied and married to those results, I think it really damages our ability to make sure we hit the right progress checkpoints. So that's him outside of the game. I think in the game, he's someone who takes laning very seriously and approaches it with a lot of pride. I think people can have a lot of criticism for how maybe we closed out the split in playoffs. I think people have some criticisms for the playoff performances. But ultimately, I think as he learns the team game at this level, paired with his laning, I think he will have the opportunity to become an incredible player. I think just right now, just like when you see academy players make the leap from academy to LCS, people have to remember, while the level of ERL regions is higher, has a higher floor than academy, they still suffer from some of the same issues, like closing out games and being able to transition, early game, mid game, objective control, those kind of things. All the team stuff, it's a work in progress because you get punished for things way less in academy or way less in ERLs, and it's up to each individual to just understand that is a really important part of the game. And so for toucouille, just like Brandon last year, it's an evolution. I think they will have to learn the importance of it. They will have to slowly adapt to that. Hopefully not slowly, but we have the patience for it. But they will have to develop the value for it, and then we'll see where they go from there. But I think as a laning individual, and just like his mechanical prowess on champions, I think he's incredible. I think the playoff series against EG obviously we didn't get to showcase how good he can actually be. But
totally. So I think final point on LCS. So summer, it'll be around the corner before we know it. And with making playoffs this past season, I think it's back to the whole like weird top 8 makes playoffs thing. So we'll see what that's like. But for you and for the team, have your expectations now elevated for summer? Where are you looking for the team to place? Basically, what's the goal for summer?
Similar to spring. I want to be in playoffs. That's like, no contest. We have to be in playoffs, especially with there's 8 teams now.
Yeah.
So we can take it easier, right?
No, we're not going to take it easier. If anything, I want to push harder on us to take each week more seriously. I think that 5-1 slipping into, we finished what, 9-9? Is that what it was?
Yeah,
rough back.
If you want to get technical.
I think when we beat TL and when we beat C9, those were indicators of where we could be as a team.
Yeah.
And then when we lost to teams like CLG, when we lost to even Immortals, it's funny enough, Immortals is actually the only team we haven't beat the split yet. We beat every other team except for them. So I would say the expectation for a team in our position is we need to beat the teams that we know we're supposed to beat. It goes without saying. This is the same thing you hear in sports, and the same thing you hear, really any competition, is the mark of a good team is beating the teams you're supposed to. And then from there is when we flex and when we are on our A game, like what does our ceiling look like? So for me, I want to make sure that at no point in the season do we take it easy to where we just accept losing to the teams that we know we're supposed to beat. I'm not saying Immortals is a bad team. I just think we're a better team. And I think we should hold ourselves to a standard, right? And I think going from there, I think it's not an improbable expectation for us to want to be in the top 5 again. And I think if we had like 2 or 3 more weeks in the regular season, of course we're not going to have that, but if we had 2 or 3 more weeks in the regular season, I think our EG series could have looked different. I think it could have been a different top 3 at this playoffs. But I do think our playoff series against EG highlighted a lot of the clear weaknesses that we had as a team, and they were clearly exposed in a best of 5. And so that's something that we're going to have to learn from a lot, because it's more than just the macro. I think it has to do with some of the draft things that we need to nail down when we go into the summer split. and then I think, outside of that, like I said before, it just boils down to what we do on a week by week basis. I think preparation is so important.
Totally. Yeah. I will say that I do think Immortals is a bad team. I don't think they're a good team. At least they did not showcase anything good this past spring. And
we'll be your spoke piece for the things you don't want to say.
Yeah.
Just DM us what you want us to say.
I got some boys over there.
Yeah, I know.
Mo's over there.
Oh,
you
yeah.
have, totally. Tristan. If you're following the rumors, there could be a couple other faces that pop up in the league. I'm just excited all the time when we get to play some of our old guys, especially the guys that came from the 2020 run. Yeah. So I love the guys over there. I think they have a chance to be more competitive in summer if they make specific changes, and I'm just excited to see what people do. I think before you ask this question, I'll answer it. I'm gonna monitor what happens between spring and summer between different teams, and if there's a change that we feel like we would like to make or feel the need to make and it makes sense for us, then we'll make it. But at this time, I think our issues won't be quickly solved from trades or from free agency. I think a lot of it comes down to just what kind of identity we want to carve out as a team and how we I guess master that, really.
Totally. I think that helps us actually segue into, and yeah, you totally anticipated the question I was gonna drop. You've done this before.
He's in your head.
Yeah. But I think we wanted to transition to talking about Academy a little bit. And Nox, I'll let you kind of run with your question, but in a moment, generally the team improved so much. We felt over the spring season, culminating in top 6 at Proving Grounds, and I think I heard over and over from Path to LCS casters saying over and over, wow, this team has gotten so good over the last few weeks, while watching Proving Grounds. And it was so great to watch them get better. Yuuji and Spirax in particular, I was just blown away by their play. I was like, these guys look so freaking good. So yeah, Nox, I know you had some thoughts on Academy.
Yeah, I mean, just to highlight how significant it is, at least from my perspective. I don't know how important it is to you or the org, Nick. I don't know how much Proving Grounds weighs in your mind, but it's the first time FlyQuest has ever made top 6 in Proving Grounds. I think it's a very, very respectable tournament for the Academy system. You guys had, in my opinion, the most improved gameplay out of any other squad in the Academy system. And that's off the back of Yuuji specifically, in my opinion. So I kind of wanted to just follow up, just like, how have him and Spirax been, or Spirax, I can't ever, Spirax or Spirax? Just remind me real quick.
Tomato, bro. we call him by his first name. It's either Jalal or we even call him DJ Halal.
Nice.
David made that one up.
Oh, that's great.
It's because I mean, it just sounds funny, but also, I mean, I've had Revenge before, I had Viper before, but Jalal is like the third player I've had that has had to go through Ramadan during like a crucial point in the season.
Oh man!
So like he as soon as PG started, he was like, oh well, here comes the fasting, And I've had that with Viper and Revenge during like playoffs, and so I kind of know how it's supposed to go. But I mean, Jalal's been doing that for so much of his life, and now to add professional play and kind of the the level of commitment you have to have and the kind of schedule you have to keep, it's tough. And so I think he was a real champ for being able to pull out what he was able to pull out during Proving Grounds.
I thought he looked awesome, and more than anything, I just kind of wanted to ask, like, how do they feel after their first split in official professional play?
Yeah, probably the best answer you're going to get from them is disappointed. And I think the reason I say that is, like, this is the other thing in Academy too, is every team in Academy, every player that enters Academy, their goal is, I want to win Proving Grounds, or I want to win playoffs, or whatever it is year after year, right? This year and last year happened to be Proving Grounds, so that's people's goals. And I think it's realistic and unrealistic at the same time to like focus on that milestone before you've even had a chance to step into a new system and start playing scrims. So when, after our first for LCS it was lock in, but for Academy it was like week 1, week 2, week 3. After our first couple weeks, a lot of people were like, oh man, yeah, see, I think Cubby had, David memes this a lot. Cubby had put us like C plus or something. We're supposed to be like C plus tier, Academy team. And it kind of didn't matter to me, but I think it mattered to the players, and I think they expected their level of play to be so much higher. Yuuji coming from purely a solo queue environment with no competitive experience whatsoever was like, yeah, it's kind of a shock to me, like a wake up call that I can't just feel the game out and just play like it's solo queue because so many different things could happen that I'm not prepared for. So his development was pretty significant. I think Jalal at least had like collegiate experience, but just like we were talking about Academy and ERLs going to the next level and getting punished harder for certain things, I think that was Jalal's wake up call in realizing, okay, laning is a little more complex than I anticipated it to be. Mid game stuff, team fighting, that's all more complex than I expected it to be. And then honestly, it wasn't until maybe week 5 or somewhere around week 5 where we started to see kind of a turn in the approach that both of those players had towards the game. I think if you go from week 1 through week 4, we squeaked out some wins just on account of having good mechanics, but I don't think we really.
I was going to say week 2 against Immortals. I thought I saw something there that was like, oh, they're learning, like they're looking better.
I mean, our biggest thing is consistency. Our biggest thing is consistency, and I think for our Academy team, if we're at the top, I think we're a tremendous team. But I think if we're not on our game on a specific day, we look probably like one of the worst Academy teams. And that's something that all the players acknowledged by the end of the split, is like, we have an incredibly high ceiling, we have so much potential, but we also have these days and these games and these moments where we just kind of brain fart and we don't really know what we're doing. We just look like headless chickens. And so that's going to be the growth for the team, is what happens when our main shot caller in Diamond, or even Tomo stepped up a lot this year, what happens when our main voices are, maybe they didn't play the lane that well, maybe they over-aggressed and then something happened that set them behind and it changes the complexion of how the draft is supposed to play out. How do we step up? How does our top side step up with not that much experience? And I think this team has shown that we are capable of taking those opportunities and making the game a little more in our hands. Whereas I think if you look during the regular season, we weren't so good if we couldn't get out of laning phase at least neutral. So that's something that I'm proud of them for. And I think for me, the goal isn't always necessarily these guys have to be LCS ready at the end of summer, but I'm excited for their trajectory, because I think I think it validated our scouting. I think we took a huge gamble. I think at the end of the split, as we were doing exit interviews, I could have been having a very different talk with all the players, right? Like this split could have gone really south. We could have had no development, but I think we underwent a lot of growth in our individual players. That was the key, is we needed to catch them up in a sense. And I think it bodes really, really well for their futures.
Yeah, it's all to give a pat on the back.
It's not just me. I mean, obviously you saw Loyota, he took on a new role. Richard does a lot of scouting for us in terms of identifying, player potential, mechanics, those kind of things. And then when it comes to just like brains and being able to adapt to a macro game, obviously like Alex is kind of the engineer behind figuring out what guys make sense in our system. And so we all work hand in hand to make sure that the guys that we're scouting and the guys that we're throwing in our system make sense for what we want to accomplish. And I think it's validating for us to see where we started to where we ended, because I think a lot of people had doubts on why we put rosters together the way we did. Shout out to Tim7 Houston, because I know he had some words to say about our team when we first made it. He was like, I don't know about this roster, it didn't get much better. I'm happy with where we went, and that's that's not a slap. Anybody can have any sort of reaction preseason. You never really know what's gonna come of it until you get through a dozen or so games.
I mean, preseason's just a face check of what does it look like on paper. But,
yeah.
Once you're in the scene and doing your own scouting, which there's not that many armchair analysts who are doing that, let's be honest.
Yeah. Honestly, I think scouting is such a funny thing. I think we want to get better at it, and we want to be more consistent about how we do it, so that the information that we're generating, that it just makes sense when we're identifying, who do we choose between 1A, 1B, and 1C. But it's really funny when I talk to other teams and how they evaluate talent. Every team has like different players that they think are like, this guy's really good, and everybody else is like, maybe. Every team has one or two of those players between LCS and Academy. It's just really funny because every system's different, and every personality is so wildly different that some players might make sense in certain rosters, and then they actually don't adapt, and the compatibility is kind of off. So that's something that I find really important. I try to look at the compatibility factor a lot in my shoes, and I kind of let my skill positions and Brendan, Richard, Alex, I let them do a little bit more of the heavy lifting when it comes to where these guys fit from a talent perspective.
So I'm actually glad you mentioned the system, how different teams approach it, and like where like some team players look good on different teams and all that. Because specifically when it comes to players that look like they're LCS ready, and when you have players that are in Academy at that point, without getting into specifics of maybe FlyQuest plans, but like, what do you think is the thing that most orgs are encouraged to do? Like, do they sell them to other teams so they get their shot? Do they promote them, or like just hold on to it until you have your player leave, so then you can bring them up without having to sign any new contracts? Like, what do you think the current system encourages?
I think at the root of it, teams are still approaching the academy system with the intention of being able to sell talent to other teams. I think over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, I think the market has shifted pretty dramatically. So in terms of like how much maybe a C9 or a TL or a TSM could sell talent for 3 years ago, I think it's vastly different now. I think you've heard quoted numbers, right, of where players stand. I think like if you think about, it's a good example. Give me a rumor that you guys have heard for like an academy player selling for. I had a hard time off the top of my head. I go through too many.
I'm trying to think.
I would hand that to Nox if anyone.
Yeah, Nox.
What's one of the weird ones you've heard?
Probably. I mean, initially, like using you as an example, right? Diamond, whenever he was picked up, like that whole package deal.
Yeah.
It was somewhere in the range of like a couple 100,000, I think, if I recall correctly, which I don't know how accurate that was.
I won't disclose it, but like for instance, like let's say a player like Diamond, who I think has a lot of value still, and I think it's unfortunate that a lot more teams aren't giving him more LCS considerations, because I think he's actually grown quite a bit from even 2020 in terms of the kind of player he was in 2020. I think he's a more well-rounded player from 21 and then this split. Same thing with Tomo. Players like that, and I think Tomo and Diamond are probably like top 2 bot lanes in the league, and people can argue with me, but I think if you compare, I think you're hard pressed to find more than one other bot lane that you would put them up against.
In the Academy League or
in the
like
Academy League?
Okay.
In the Academy League. So when you think about that caliber, right? Let's say top 2 or top 3 bot lanes, and you take them as individual counterparts. Before, you could probably try to ask for anywhere between $500,000 to $700,000 for a team that felt the need to, okay, I'm going to go younger. I'm going to invest in this guy because the guys that are around me currently that have more experience, I don't feel like they have the ceiling for where I want to be in, this year or the next couple years. Fast forward now, I think you're probably expecting more reasonable buyouts, par for the course, probably anywhere between 1 to 200,000. So the appetite for buyouts is significantly lower than where it was a few years ago, even a couple years ago. And I think teams I'm trying not to make this a criticism of the teams in our league, but people are slow to understand that. I think never knock someone for trying to get the most money out of selling a player, but the appetite for buyouts is just so far lower now. Right. Besides like maybe like 3 or 4 players, right? And I think in our league system, for the entirety of it, until we introduce new teams to the league, if we ever expand, I think there will only ever be a handful of players that will warrant significant buyouts from here on out. And I think any academy player from here on out will probably not see buyouts larger than maybe 200,000. And that's a significant drop off.
Yeah. That's super interesting. Okay. So if buyouts aren't as, relevant, you would expect, internal promotions then to be more on the table, right? If you can't sell your talent, then you probably want to bring them up. So I do want to ask, kind of a combo question. FlyQuest did announce the scouting combine happening in May. So from that, basically, are you guys looking to put together an amateur team?
So that's the assumption. I will kind of lay that to rest. And that I would say the intention of the scouting combine at its core is not to produce an amateur team. It's not to say that there's not potential to do that at any time of our choosing, but this is the start of us, like I said, being more consistent and being more intelligent with how we do scouting.
Perfect.
And it's really important for us. So at the end of last season, we got started with doing kind of like a tryout system that we ran for a couple weeks, and we invited, LCS level players, academy level players, even amateur level players to kind of identify and understand what players would make sense going into 2022. This year is now 2 combines or 2 tryout systems. This one between spring and summer that we're running probably first week of May or so, the first weekend of May is what we're targeting. That one is with the intention of identifying players on the solo queue ladder, amateur, academy, guys who maybe have never gotten real competitive experience, guy, female, doesn't really matter. We just want to discover and we want to identify who's out there. So as the season progresses, as years go by, we can kind of have where I value things. We want to be able to build upon what we know. And so if I see, let's take like C9 Avril, for example. I don't know if you guys know her, but she's been pretty high elo. She's an 80 carry player. I want to see if she's serious about competitive play. I want to see how she goes from, how she was last year to spring 22 to summer 22 to spring 23 to summer 23. And that's kind of how we want to approach as many players as we can. And we want to acknowledge how they grow. Eventually, we'll start even looking at, if we can find them, 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds, and not with the intention of signing them immediately, but now we have a system for acknowledging how these guys develop and where these guys grow. Because instead of just looking at solo queue ladder and going, oh wow, from 2021 to 2022, this guy was 1,000 LP and this guy's now at struggling to get past 400 LP, that can't be our only way of identifying whether a player got better or worse. And so at least this gives us an opportunity to see, okay, how has this person's communication developed? Does this player seem a little more mature? Where this guy's mechanics, how is this guy impacted by X support? Those kind of things are important to us, and this is just scratching the surface, but this is our way of stepping into having more accountability with our scouting process, and when we get to the off seasons, being able to actually make way more educated decisions is what we hope for with our program. And so eventually, I would love to have an amateur team. I think why we didn't is because I made a conscientious gamble to make our academy team more about development this year than probably any other academy system right now. And that could change in the future, right? Like every year, the systems and their purposes might change. We might add an amateur program at the end of this year. Who knows? But I'd like to think that in taking these small steps like this combine, we'll have more information at our disposal. That's really the vision behind it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think that's something you see in traditional sports a lot. I mean, over in European football, a lot of those clubs have U18, U21, down to U14, like all these levels of play where they can track their players over, sometimes a decade plus, and eventually the cream rises to the top. My team, Manchester City, they brought up this young guy, Phil Foden, who's now starting, for the English national team, and he came up all the way through their system, as from a kid, and so I like hearing you talk about identifying those younger players and grabbing them earlier. One last question on Academy, and then we'll switch over to our Marth Man himself.
Show him some love.
Yeah, got to show him some love. One last question on Academy. So and by the end of summer, when off season hits, there's always there's the conversation of like changes and what'll need to happen. For you, will you look at where the academy guys have gotten and consider, are some of them ready to be brought up to the LCS? Is that something that you would actively be thinking about?
Well, I think every split will always actively be thinking about it.
Cool.
I mean, even right now, I'm, trying to make sure that people are actually thinking about Tomo and Diamond. Even our own system. Do they make sense in our system right now in LCS? It's a conversation we'll have every split with any player that we think is ready. At the end of the summer, we'll probably look at Philip, we'll probably look at Yuuji, we'll probably look at Jalal, and think, okay, what does their timeline look like now that we've gone through a full year with them? What does their timeline look like in terms of being LCS ready? And, do we have considerations for them? Like, what do these iterations look like if we want to incorporate them into the LCS system? Of course, we'll have that conversation. I think we're pretty blessed in a way where we have this top side that is starting to really show presence in games. And I'm just excited to see if they can take kind of the next step and then the next step after that, because we could really use a lot more native talent, I think, in the LCS space. I think if we look at just top lane specifically, it's a very stacked role, and I think it's very like import dominated, right?
Yeah.
So just West period too, not even just LCS.
Yeah, true. I think if we can be part of a system that helps generate more native top lane talent, I think it'll be a lot more robust for the rest of the teams in our league to be able to have, a crop of players that they can actually look at that are competitive to that level. So
totally,
I'm hopeful, and I'm excited for it.
Absolutely. All right, KoDoRiN, 9th place at Genesis, I think.
Oh, I know.
And I think I know he was very transparent on Twitter about his disappointment.
Yeah.
So we won't get into the specifics there, but I do want to ask you, how has it been having a Smash player, as part of the org? I don't know how much interaction you have with, that side of it, but how's it been having a new franchise in the org? We've never had a fighting game player before. So what's that been like over the last few months for you guys?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, I think off the bat, it's nice for longtime FlyQuest fans to see us in a game other than League of Legends.
Absolutely.
I mean, personally for me, I miss having some of our Apex guys. I miss our Rocket League guys, for example. PUBG was fun when it first came out. Fortnite, mixed bag. I don't know how I feel about the game still, but I know some of the guys in our company like to play it still. So, but for me, I miss having a more diversified week experience. So like, one day I'll be with my league team, the other day I'll be with my old Apex guys, Rocket League team, and I'll be able to kind of like monitor all of them. And I like to work in more chaotic systems like that. I think until recently I've just been focused on League of Legends, so it's fun and I get to put more time into the league guys, but I do miss having exposure to some of the other titles. And for now, it's just watching other esports for research and just keeping up with the scenes and understanding them. But Smash is great. I think our COO, Michael specifically, has been a longtime Smash fan. Very invested in the space from not just a playing perspective, but also just knowing the personalities and knowing the scene. And I think our company has done a really good job of basically leveraging something that KoDoRiN was already doing, which was the TMTs every Tuesday, and making them into a product that a lot more Smash players want to be involved in. Obviously, the prize pool is notched up, the production is notched up. You're seeing, top 10 players entering TMTs, and so the competition level of it is super cool too. So I'm very happy from the standpoint of being able to see a competitor like KoDoRiN develop every single tournament that he's a part of, seeing him develop more composure, seeing him just get more comfortable in his skin, I would say, because he's relatively new to the competitive space in Smash. Like, he's only been doing this for a couple of years, maybe 2.5 years, and so in the Smash scene, we're so grassroots, and there's people, legends. You have the gods with Mango, HBox, and some of the other guys. Like, there's people that have been doing this for decade, like a full decade, right?
Yeah.
So seeing him adapt to that, seeing us have that IP with the TMT, it feels cool to be ingrained in a community in this way. I think it's harder to do that in obviously like League of Legends or CS or Valorant, even Dota. I think it's just really cool. I think the community has embraced us in a really awesome way as well.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about TMTs. It definitely
literally answered the second
it was
question.
it was the next question. TMTs have been so good, and it's been really cool watching. Yeah, just like them explode in a way. That's been really good. What is so obviously managing a Smash player is different than like a whole League of Legends team. So generally, what are the interactions like for you? What are you generally doing to assist him? Is it making sure he's got his plane tickets for the next event?
A lot more of it is like being like an actual like individual manager for him. So schedule, logistics, all that stuff. Like I'll take care of. We have a lot of good conversations usually about just how he's feeling for matches, how he's feeling at certain tournaments, different things like that. And just being a competitor and being around a lot of competitors, I can usually just be a good ear for him, and I'll have maybe a couple things to say. Maybe sometimes I don't, and he just needs an ear to talk about like, maybe some of the stresses he has when he competes. I think that's been a really cool relationship to have. And then outside of that, it's kind of cool because he kind of duels as like a content creator / influencer for us with the TMTs. So marketing and content have done an incredible job. We have done a lot more internship stuff this year. So like our content intern Iggy, who was kind of co-running TMTs with KoDoRiN before FlyQuest, is now not only still doing that, but learning a lot of other like content production stuff on the side as part of her internship. So like shout out to her, and then shout out to Ricky for being such a good teacher and mentor on that. And then I think just Michael knowing the scene so well with Smash and having a good pulse on like how we can contribute to the scene, I think has given us a lot of invaluable knowledge when it comes to working with KoDoRiN and how we continue to like solidify ourselves there. I think we're also seeing things like Ludwig's like $1 million tournament that he keeps touting about, and so I'm really excited. I'm excited for when that comes around, because that hopefully opens the floodgates to more of those kind of, grassroots tournaments that I think we'd probably like to get involved in something similar like that one day. But I think as more of these stuff pop up, I'm just excited for the scene to get some of the love that they've deserved for such a long time.
Totally.
So yeah, I mean, as far as the managerial experience, like I've worked with a ton of different esports titles, and managing a Smash player is only different because it's not a team.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like I'm his booking agency, and I'm his assistant, and
you're on.
He's such a fun dude though, because he just has such a. I was talking about how like toucouille has such a pure spirit. I think KoDoRiN has also a pretty like fun-loving, pure-hearted spirit too. He's a little quirky. He knows exactly what he wants. He has a lot of input with all the different things that we do, whether it's like marketing certain things or how we run TMTs, and even down to like what we're tweeting and like the different clips that we tweet and stuff. He has a lot of input on those kind of things because he's just like so like, this is my baby and I want it to come out perfect.
Yeah.
I like seeing him work. It's just it's a really cool relationship that we have with him. It's not just like he's only part of the competitive department, but it feels like he's a pretty significant member to our organization already. And I know there was one conversation I think we had like following Summit in December where he didn't feel like he performed all that well, and I think we had a long talk, and he was like, I just want to feel like I'm providing value, like you're not wasting your guys' resources on me. And it's like, I never want anybody to feel like that when they come into our organization, but it's cool how humble he approaches everything and how hungry he is, because I think with how much talent there is at FlyQuest, not just speaking from a competitive standpoint, but like the people we got on marketing, the people we got in content, and just everybody top down. I think there's so many things we can do that I think he's gonna really feel. He's gonna feel the love. The community's gonna feel the love, and he's gonna really feel like he belongs somewhere. That's my goal. Is I hope anybody that comes in, they feel like they belong. So KoDoRiN, sick dude, love him.
Yeah, no,
I love hearing that. That's awesome.
That's really good. Nox, I think you've got another topic that we're going to switch over to.
Yes. So just real fast, switching back over to League talks real quick, as much as I want to give more love to KoDoRiN, because Lord knows he deserves it.
Of course, yeah.
Jackie Felling, recent acquisition of the new LCS commissioner and head of North American LoL esports. She's been very vocal on Twitter and Reddit, and from a fan perspective, that's been awesome. But I haven't really heard anything from kind of any of the org's perspectives or from like the GM's perspective. So have you interacted with her at all? What's she been like? Have you had meetings? Like, just, you can keep it vague, obviously. It doesn't anything like get into specifics, but just, how's she been?
Yeah, so old Commissioner Greeley, he's obviously been promoted to a bigger role at Riot, and so super happy for him. I don't know too much about Jackie from pre-Riot, so as far as like impressions, in terms of like my own impressions of, I mean, if they're gonna hire her, I'm sure she's good at what she does. I think my first impression of her coming in was how eager she was to meet everybody, and I think that's like the first step in kind of assimilating yourself into this league and this space. Is we're gonna have to rely on her for a lot of important things, the same way we relied on Chris Greeley, and at least she made the effort to make sure that she's exposed to the players and the staff and management. So for me, she seems like an awesome person. I think I need to hold, or I have my own reservations, and I'm withholding things because I think Riot has had a history, I think, of being a little slower to make certain decisions or make certain adjustments. And without going to the nitty gritty, I want to see how those things develop. I think operationally, I think anything could be better, not just with Riot, but our own company and other organizations as well. So I want to see when the real work, I don't know what that even means, but when the real work starts to get done, what are the results of that? What's the outcome before I really have any judgment? As a person, she seems great. She seems really cool. She seems really down to earth. And so I'm looking forward to when, maybe the bigger decisions come and how she navigates those things and how she communicates with the teams. But at least initially, seems cool to me.
Totally. Yeah, kind of quick follow-up, maybe just on LCS overall. I mean, how do you feel the state of the league is right now? And don't need to go too deep on this, but, I think there's been a lot of conversation about viewership and, things like that. So, like, how do you feel, LCS went this spring? Obviously not over, and we've got our first big LAN finals in, like, almost 3 years coming up.
I know, crazy.
So hyped. But, I mean, how do you feel like LCS is going just overall as a league?
I probably don't have a big answer for you, so sorry if you were hoping for
something short and sweet is fine.
I think it's hard to say. I think there were a lot of things that probably could have been done during remote play to capitalize on the fact that LCS could sustain while being remote.
Yeah.
But I think as we're getting fans in the arena, and I do hope that summer has fans in the arena, and I'm hoping that the live event part of like Riot production and all that stuff, that helps generate a little more attention. More the nitty gritty stuff, like when it comes to like patch cycles and it comes to the health of the game in general, I have some criticisms, but not really enough time, or I think this is the wrong audience to have that kind of discussion right now.
Sure, yeah.
So,
no worries.
But when it comes, maybe like if we want to talk about viewership, of course, I think it's a little frustrating to see viewership kind of stagnate a little bit. But I think that's been a discourse that we've had every single year, like, oh, LCS, viewership is dwindling or it's stagnating. What should we do about it? I don't think there's a whole clear-cut thing, but I do think LCS is tasked with a tough situation now, because I think the mentality of a lot of people on the Riot side has been to kind of ride the curtails of specific brands that we've had for such a long time. So Doublelift, Bjergsen, to just name a couple guys, they've had the luxury of leaning on them for such a long time, and now when those personalities are gone, and of course Soren's back, but a lot of the personalities that they leaned on are gone, where do we go from there? And I would say it's cool to see JoJo. It's cool to see Danny. I think Vulcan it's just a funny dude. I think Fudge is a funny dude, but they all have very similar personas. And then most of the personas you see like through Twitter. So it's like there's nothing unique for me there yet as a viewer. If I'm just taking this as a viewer, there's nothing unique for me yet. And so the task of creating enriching narratives and the task of like creating new, league faces, I think is going to be a hard task. Because until we have those more polarizing figures and those more polarizing like fan bases, whether that's for certain players or certain teams, I think it's going to be hard to make the LCS exciting again. And then I think as like I don't know if this is going too far. I think it would be way more exciting either we expand or teams feel more responsible for putting together better product is what I'd say. Is I think that
I
the
think,
floor of our league is
yeah,
a little frustrating to have for a league that's been around for so long.
I think you'll find a lot of agreement on this show about that. So.
Oh yeah.
So I was going to ask real quick then, what are just things that FlyQuest, or I guess not even specifically FlyQuest, but like what are something like orgs can do better to help create better narratives for the LCS itself? Because it kind of seems like some of those orgs that you're referencing, not to get specific, are just like you said, riding the curtails, right? And they're kind of relying on Riot to do the work to get the narratives going and getting the stories going and driving investment into those players. Like, what is something the orgs can be doing to help create a better product for LCS? Because it's not just a one-way street, right? Like the orgs have to give something too.
That is a hard question to answer. I think it's so different.
Sorry.
I think it's very different for every other organization, and I think it's unfair of me to say that we don't have responsibility towards it. But what I think like a lot of teams can do better is like stop doing so much docuseries type content and do content that pulls personality out of players. Because if I have to watch another docuseries thing, and I have not watched docuseries content besides TSM Legends when they go 0-2 on weekends, like if I have to watch another docuseries content where all I see is people like, oh yeah, we lost, we gotta draft better, or we gotta play better next week, and that is all I get for like 30 minutes every time I watch one of those things, like what makes me want to watch that again the next week? Like there's just nothing there pulling me in. So I'm glad that at FlyQuest we don't like lean on that as like our main source of like feeding BTS content for our players. I think Ricky does a tremendous job of getting buy-in from the players, and the players have wacky personalities themselves. So when we do things like the Spanish quiz or the French quiz or the GED thing, like those are like fun little ways to get people to like see our players beyond like this guy plays top lane or this guy plays jungle, And I think I think more content in that direction, not only from us but from other organizations, helps on the organization side. Beyond that, I think there are critical things that can be discussed, but again, I think our forum here is a little different than for that kind of discussion. I will say the league is trending in an interesting space where I think the PA wants to be present, and I think the PA wants to be a body that has some sort of agency or some sort of power. And while I don't think they have much right now, if players do take it seriously and players decide we should consider unionizing, there's a lot of conversation that has to go into that, because I think to date players don't have real accountability for their own brands, and so the brands that you see from players is just what they're willing to do through team content or through team sponsorship activations. But what if we're traditional sports, and what if teams are not really responsible for player brands anymore, and what if Jose Dioto signs a sponsor deal with like Nike and now releases like Nike like keyboards or something, and like what does that look like for more than like 3 or 4 players to have these significant brand deals, and now they're selling themselves without like organizations or without the league.
There's a lot of
then it becomes a little different. Then they are an independent like vertical, aside from just being a player on a team and besides just being in the LCS or in Call of Duty or in Overwatch.
Right.
It just creates a different, a different ecosystem.
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot of...
Need more Red Bull sponsorships like the Ericsson had back in the day.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a lot of options out there. I think Travis Gafford on Hotline League had a couple of the PA guys, the management there, or leadership, and they talked about trading cards a lot. That's really the only thing they mentioned. But there's a lot of opportunities that players could have to sign branding deals as a players' association with companies to literally just generate money for themselves and generate revenue. And I really hope the players see that as a viable opportunity. Speaking of,
you said Jose Diodo with Nike and making a Nike keyboard, and I just can't get Jose Diodo do it out of my head.
Oh, that's great! Oh, that's perfect. That's the slogan.
All right, Chris, I'm not going to vouch for that one, but if you want to pitch that to Jose and Nike at the same time, I'll see what I can do, bro. I'll see what I can do to clear Jose's calendar.
Just give me
$5
if that goes through.
Yeah.
$5 if that's
Yeah.
Curly, I think
you just get the conference room ready. Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Curly, I think you've got one big question left for Nick, and then I have a tiny one, and we'll wrap up.
I do. So we're actually talking about players and their personal branding, and one place they can kind of flex their stuff is this thing that Riot created called Champions Queue. So it's been a very volatile discussion topic this split. Sometimes it was being praised, and then when it came to the fallout in these last couple weeks, people have been criticizing the way Riot handles it. So then, just in FlyQuest, how have the players, how have the team, how have they felt about that? Like, what are the general feelings towards it? Because especially, I know we were very active in there at first.
Yeah, so one of the frustrating things about Champs Queue is something that happens in solo queue sometimes too, where the queue times get too long because certain roles aren't online at the time, right? So, for example, there's so few top laners that are playing Champs Queue lately, and what that does to the queue times is anytime a top laner gets in Champs Queue, they hit queues immediately. But every other role has to wait 30-40 minutes, and so some of these guys get frustrated, and then they're simultaneously queuing solo queue and Champs Queue at the same time because they don't want to just wait an hour to not have a queue. Do you know what I mean? Or not have a game pop. And so I think that recently has been the biggest problem. But I think starting off Champs Queue, I think probably the problem with that one was everybody has to acknowledge that with anything, whether it's Champs Queue, whether it's a project, whether it's a new environment, there's always the honeymoon phase. And the honeymoon phase was, oh shoot, we're playing basically solo queue on low ping and for tons of money. Who doesn't love that, right? But I think once Split 1 ended and people realized that it was just a system that was meant to abuse how many games you're actually able to get in, because I think you get +10 per win, you're -5 per lose. So if you just put in volume, you're likely to just gain points naturally, right? And there was no MMR system. And so when that happens, it kind of feels like you're coin flipping a win or a loss based on what kind of a team you get. And so I think the council and Champs Queue made some small changes to that, where the teams had to be a little balanced based on how many amateur players there were in the queue, or how many academy players or LCS players were in the queue. And I think one of the problems that I see with Champs Queue that I've seen in past esports, so Fortnite, PUBG, Apex, is when you give players control over making decisions with these kind of queues and the ownership is not on one more objective party, gatekeeping happens. And when the discussion of gatekeeping happens and there's certain players X individual doesn't want to play with or thinks is toxic to the environment of Champs Queue, or this player shouldn't deserve to be in it, then you raise other questions about, okay, well, if this person doesn't make the cut, why does this person still get to be in here? And why is this person here? But then why isn't X player on the other side not allowed to be in Champs Queue? And then I think that situation itself is really hard to rectify, because at some point when you have all these players on the council that are responsible for making these decisions or having input, no one's going to be all aligned and all happy about whatever decision you end up making, which is whether you include a certain player or dismiss a certain player. For sure. The problem is solo queue itself, we always talk about how the player base in North America at a high level is not that big. In Champs Queue, you're pretty much like you're cutting off like a third of the country because
wow.
no one's going to play from the East Coast to LA ping, which is what
No.
Champions Queue was designed for, because you're getting like 90 ping on the East Coast if you're playing Champs Queue, because in Champs Queue LA area you're getting like 15 ping, 20 ping, right? So automatically you're already cutting off like a third of the player base, unless these guys want to like put themselves in that position and torture themselves. That's a totally other thing. But once you're there, now you have 2/3 of the players, and the people on your council, and then the people that are playing Champs Queue and that are reporting other players. You have 50% of players that don't want to play with another 50% of players, and so how do you make the right decisions to ensure that the player base playing Champions Queue is healthy?
Yeah.
And that there are people actually playing. Like when people overreact of like, I don't want to play with this guy, does that mean this person is going to not play Champions Queue at all? And then is that going to cause a ripple effect where other people don't play? And so that discussion of like trying to figure out what the right decisions are to make, I think it's just really hard when you give stakeholders that have an emotional attachment to it, right? The players, when you give them power over it. I think it would have been better if Riot plus org staff just owned it in general, and just made some of the unfair decisions.
So maybe disconnect.
So be it.
From the players,
so be it. Yeah, exactly. Because as players, they have to just take the hand they're dealt and just deal with it. I think that's a better situation from my eyes personally. But because we're in this situation now, it's a matter of figuring out what the right way is to move into the summer with, and I think you have no choice but to open up Champs Queue to more players. There's going to be people that apply that maybe aren't part of competitive teams, but they're high enough elo or whatever. I think you have no choice but to let these guys in, because where it's at now, apparently the money isn't enough for players to play. So where do you go from there? I do think it's a little unfair though. Like a lot of teams got knocked out of playoffs or didn't make playoffs, or got knocked out of Proving Grounds, and a lot of these guys go on their off-season time. It's just awkward timing that Champs Queue is in that mix of timing, and some of these guys are going to take a break. That's natural. And I think a lot of people that aren't on competitive teams are kind of just like grasping at something to create an issue to talk about. I don't necessarily think it's because NA players are lazy that no one's really playing Champs Queue right now. I think like people are discouraged because of queue times. A lot of players are taking a break because their off season is here. And I genuinely think when Champs Queue comes back, you're going to have a decent enough group of people to where the complaint of like, oh, there's not enough players there. I think you'll have a decent enough wave for that. But I do think people have to understand too, as the season progresses, as you get into the middle of the season and the later season, as things get more stressful and there's playoffs, people will change their practice habits. It's like it's easier to grind Champs Queue and Solo Queue at the start of a split, but when things get deeper and you identify more problems that you have to fix, and maybe like those problems are fixed more linearly or in one direction, like it changes. You don't just like run your head into the wall and go 100 Champ Queue games a week is like the solution for everything, And so that's a hard thing to remedy, I think.
I think something you hit on right there at the end. You can play a lot of Champs Queue games and Solo Queue games to work on mechanics, but sometimes the issues on a team are team based. It's communication, it's coordination, timing your engage, doing whatever your macro is, and that's not something you can really solve by queuing up with 9 other random people, even in Champs Queue. So and I agree. And I mean, at this point, pretty much 80. If you just count the Academy and LCS player base, it's 100 people. There's only 15 players left who are actively competing. Proving Grounds is over. 7 teams have been eliminated, from LCS. People want to go home. They want to take a break. Like, it's understandable. And I do think there is a little bit of a grasping for, like, oh, Champions Queue was doomed to fail. No, it's like, it clearly did work. And it's only been, like, 3 months. Like, give it some time to refine the process and how it works. And clearly Riot wants to refine it. So I think we'll.
I do think. I do think Champions Queue released urgently because of the demand for it.
Yes.
But I think my impression is the product released when it wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's because somebody missed some deadlines or like the work was the amount of work to be done to make it a ready product on launch was underestimated. It's got to be one of those two things. I think we got an unfinished product, and I think.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong.
You know,
it's a Discord bot, basically, right?
Yeah.
So that's
a little different from what was advertised,
right?
I will say.
I think most people, when they envision Champions Queue, they envision something in client, and you know, click queue up in client and not through Discord and having to then go make the private game yourself and all that. Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah.
Okay. Final topic of the night. Been holding out on it, but
oh no, I know what it is.
March 11th, 2022. The Seattle Seahawks traded quarterback Russell Wilson. I'm reading this straight off the ESPN transaction list, so I can get it correct. Russell Wilson and their upcoming 4th-round pick for multiple picks and tight end, defensive end, and quarterback Drew Lock. So, I mean, we got to hit this. Russ Wilson gone from Seattle. He's been a mainstay there for so long. I mean, clearly something wasn't working for Seattle last season. Multiple things weren't working. I mean, how are you feeling about losing Russ? And I mean, is it just rebuild through the draft? Like, what's the steps here? I mean, what are you guys gonna do?
Yeah. Hold on. Let me look up what the trade ended up being, because I had.
You got Noah Phan, who's actually pretty good.
Yes, I do like him, but like, it depends on who your quarterback is, right? And it depends on the scheme. So let me look back at this trade, because I had a much more polarizing opinion when the trade first came out. But I do remember the last time we talked. What did we say when we approached that topic? I did say
the whole offensive line needed to go.
And I think
you were open to Russell Wilson leaving, maybe.
Yeah. I think the Seahawks in a rebuild situation kind of had no choice but to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did was we ended up sending the Broncos Russell Wilson and a 4th-round pick in this year's draft for a 1st rounder, a 2nd rounder, and a 5th rounder, and then next year's 1st and 2nd round picks.
Yeah.
For Drew Lock, a defensive end who I think is probably healthy enough to get you like a couple more years, and then I think Noah Fant's pretty decent.
Yeah.
But we also have a couple of other tight ends that are also really good in terms of like, who do we have? I think we have Disley still.
Yeah.
And then I think we have
serviceable tight ends.
Resign,
right?
Or did Everett go somewhere else?
I think
Gerald Everett.
I thought Gerald Everett was on the Rams, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah, I think he's going somewhere else.
He was on the Seahawks.
Oh.
Gerald Everett, he's now going to the Chargers.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's now with the Chargers. So, I think because we brought in Noah Fant, I think obviously it made the tight end room a little crowded. So we got rid of one of them, or that guy re-signed somewhere else, or signed somewhere else rather. I think where I'm a little confused with the Seahawks is what their opinion is of Drew Lock, and I think that will shape how they approach the draft. If the rumors are true and they think Drew Lock is an actually good quarterback or still a promising prospect, which I don't think he's like terrible. I think he's serviceable for a couple of years of like tank and rebuilding. But if they think he's like okay to invest time into, then I think you actually invest pieces in either offensive line or your secondary, because I think secondary has been a pretty big weakness for the Seahawks too. Actually, I think the Seahawks just had a significant weakness all across the board.
If you didn't have the main first string, like, it was not pretty.
Yeah. I think mock drafts have us drafting a cornerback in the 1st round. So I actually like that draft pick, but I think it's going to be really important how we attack kind of like the 3rd, 4th, 5th round draft picks. And I think if we can't get quality, secondary players or maybe a couple other wide receivers and then maybe trade one of Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf, then I think you have to go for O-line pieces, because then that would be kind of the reason why you even let Bobby Wagner go in the first place, because you just don't want to be tied to that, cap hit. I mean, sad to lose Russell Wilson, but I also, maybe this is copium, I don't think he'll be as good in Denver.
No.
I don't think he will be either.
As people think he is.
No, I completely agree with that. I think, Denver's not a good team, so, yeah.
I haven't really looked at what Denver's been doing outside of the acquisition of Russell Wilson, but I don't think Denver's going to build around him all that well. So, I don't know. It feels kind of crappy because it's just a lose-lose situation. I think Russell is still capable of doing well for the Seahawks, but I don't think he's going to help the Broncos, and then in turn, his image is going to get somewhat not tarnished, but he's not going to be as good as he has been on the Seahawks, in my opinion. It's kind of a bad situation.
Yeah, I think he's certainly a good enough quarterback, but I don't know that he's like a difference maker for that organization. Like what the Rams did in getting Matt Stafford and surrounding Stafford with pieces, I think that was a gamble that worked out well. And I think the Broncos think they're doing the same thing, but I don't think their pieces are as strong as they think they are. I think they have a good defense. I think I would have liked to see like someone like Surtain get traded, so that's like Denver's best cornerback. And then instead of drafting for a defensive position in the first round, I probably would go, offensive line probably is probably where I would go. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't have a lot of optimism for Denver, just like I don't have a lot of optimism for Seattle right now.
Totally.
So it's tough.
Well, hey,
I like the Chargers. Maybe I'll be a Chargers fan this year.
I was going to say, I live in Dallas. Maybe we'll actually cheer on the Dallas Cowboys for once. Who knows?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I know that's a tough one for everyone else around.
Yeah,
here.
no thanks. I'll pass on the Cowboys. I think that's pretty much everything. Let me do a couple quick notes here. Thank you to Silly Shadow for the Prime. Appreciate that. And also Mr. Sen for the 5 gifted. Greatly appreciate that. From both of you, super huge. That is the show. This has been a great time. Really enjoyed having you on, Nick. Thanks so much again. Do you have any shout-outs that you want to, any plugs that you want to throw out here before we wrap up the night?
First one is shout out to my girlfriend. I think I probably drive her crazy with how much time I spend at work, and then she'll be like, you're not taking me out enough, or you're not hanging out with me enough, and I don't, and she's still supporting me, so that's awesome. I think for my team and my players, I'm so happy with the group of guys that we have, regardless of how we perform. I think we just have a special group of just humans in particular, and I just think that the process by which we approach things this year has been refreshing compared to some of the challenges that we faced last year. So
nice.
Whatever happens. It's part of the game, and I'm just excited for who we have around us. Obviously MasterCard's been great for us. Woo. We're going out to Houston this weekend, so for those of you guys that are going, you'll see Trisha, our CEO, you'll see Michael, our COO, Ricky, our VP of content, and whoever else we got going out there. Pick yourself up a jersey, okay? We do have some more merch coming out, obviously in the future months, so make sure you check that stuff out too. Fiend's been doing phenomenal.
Absolutely.
We also have a design intern that's been helping with some of those things. Honestly, it just feels great to be growing as an organization that has been through some of the ups and downs that we have. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a validation that there are people that look at us and like, man, I want to learn from them and I want to be where they are. I want to kind of include myself in the family, and I think likewise for those of us who have been at FlyQuest for so long, it's refreshing to have that. And when people come through our doors, like, we want to cherish them as much as possible. So for that, I shout out those individuals. Want to give a shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for keeping up the podcast. It's always fun hanging out with you guys, and I hope people give you guys a lot of love for what you guys do on a weekly basis. And I'm just hoping for a fun summer, man. If you guys want to know anything while we're out, and I know we didn't touch on this, but we're planning to go to Korea most likely in the month of May for a boot camp. If there's anything you guys want to know, feel free to let us know, and we'll answer what we can in the Discord, and we'll go from there, okay?
Love that. No, that's great.
We
That's awesome,
appreciate
man.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you. I'll do the quick. One last thing. Predictions for finals weekend. What are your thoughts?
TLEG, right?
Yeah, TLEG winner
TLEG.
faces 100 Thieves.
Okay. I'd say if TL doesn't grief draft, 3-1.
Okay.
Probably even 3-0. I think realistically it just comes down to, is Whippo going to play the things that make draft actually like a good draft, or is he going to kind of like play the things that he wants to play?
Right. Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think if they find a middle ground there, or they make him play the things that will help them actually win and actually get a good cohesive draft, then I think TL is a better team. And then I think when you get into the finals, I think 100 Thieves can take it home again. I think they just have more continuity, and I think they have right now, it feels like a better read on the meta, or at least their drafts are significantly more cohesive than all the other teams right now. So if it's TL advancing and it's 100 Thieves TL, I'd say probably 3-1. But again, if TL fixes their draft stuff coming into this weekend, I could also see TL winning. So
Totally. No, that's great. Love it.
Pretty much my exact predictions. I had a TL 3-1, and then I have 100 Thieves 3-1. Or sorry,
Cool.
3-2.
Yeah. I have another.
I mean,
I have another
I would
5-game
like
banger.
TL
so.
to win because I want my boy Lucas to bring home another
Yeah.
championship.
He does need a first place. That man
Got a lot of
deserves
love
it.
for him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. For
That's
sure.
true.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Flight Check. The three of us will be on site at Houston this weekend. That's freaking insane. This will actually be the first time we meet up in person. So that'll be pretty cool. So be sure to follow us on Twitter, because I'm sure we'll be posting all kinds of photos and things from our experience. So you can catch the show at Flight Check Crew, myself at SantosDB, Nox at NoxWar with 2 R's, and Curly at Curly_QQ_. You can follow Nick at Swag Saurus.
True.
Still one of the greatest Twitter
Man,
handles of all time.
I gotta change that one.
No, never.
No, you gotta
Never
keep it.
change.
It's
I-
fun.
No, I
man.
love swag.
I get a huge kick out
Guys,
of.
one day when I'm consulting in esports, when I'm at the ripe age of like 45, and people want me to introduce themselves, I'm gonna blame you guys if I have to introduce myself as Swagasaurus.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Make sure to hop into the Flight Check Discord as well, where all kinds of discussion on LCS, Smash, and everything else takes place. If you missed any part of our conversation with Nick tonight, the VOD will be up on YouTube and Twitch later tonight or tomorrow morning. The audio version of this episode should go up on Spotify either tomorrow or later this week. If you're listening to that and would like to catch the show live, we do broadcast these episodes every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here at Twitch.
So maybe this coming Monday.
Except for maybe this coming Monday, because we might be a little
Probably not
tired.
this coming Monday.
Right here at twitch.tv/FlightCheckCrew. Curly, any final notes, shoutouts, or plugs before we wrap up the night?
I mean, honestly, I just want to also follow. Thanks for Nick for mostly how quickly you were able to get on this, because it turned around behind the scenes.
Hey
turned
man,
around
I'll
way
be
quicker than I
real.
expected. Yeah.
I got a little more time now.
Oh man.
Woo!
Well, I mean, if you're talking about free time, maybe you can,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I would enjoy that. But no, seriously, huge thanks for having you on here. And then actually, I have a personal question. I'd keep it short. Who was the MVP of the escape room?
Who was the MVP of the escape room? It's a good question. Good question. I think Johnson was pretty good with the escape room this time around. I think
Nice.
Jose was not bad either.
All right.
I think they were probably the best of the players on this one.
All right, so
Yeah.
you heard it here. Biggest brains, Jose Dioto and John.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome.
Kumo was pretty good too.
It was pretty good too. All right, so
But it was a really fun escape room. If anybody wants to in the LA area, it's called Hatch Escapes, I think is the name of the escape room company. And then this particular one was called Lab Rat. We had done another escape room at the start of the season, and they were like, Yeah, if you thought ours was good, which I don't remember what we thought of theirs, but they're like, if you thought ours was good, this one's like way better, and this is like one of the more popular ones. So, we did it, and it was actually pretty. It was a pretty cool escape room.
Nice.
Had multiple rooms, multiple puzzles. It was a little more dynamic than just solve everything in here, go to the next room, solve everything in there, and then you're in the next room. It had some like come back to the different room moments. And
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's great.
That sounds cool.
Solid.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing more of that team bonding stuff on Twitter.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I don't really have any things to shout out. So yeah, just thanks.
Cool.
Yeah,
Nox.
thank you guys.
Nox, anything you want to throw out there?
We're gonna keep it short and simple. Thank you, Nick. You've been awesome having on here. Other than that, shout out to Bungie TalkPod. They're starting their podcast right now. They're freaking thrilled over the win this weekend against TL, so they're probably gonna be very energetic. Go check them out. We'll probably rate them here in a second, and then I'm going to do my best, especially since Nick, if you're willing to help me out. I'm gonna try and track all the players while they're in Korea and give updates on that on Twitter. So keep an eye out on my Twitter at Nox with 2 R's.
Got it.
Perfect.
Good luck finding our accounts, my friend.
It's gonna be Kumu instead of Kumo.
Yeah, the sleuthing will begin.
I'm just gonna have all my players type in Korean characters. So.
Perfect. For myself, thank you, Nick, for coming on the show. It's so great being able to have access to you guys and talk with you about how things are going. One more sub shout out. Thank you, Hammersmith, for the Prime. Appreciate it. Coming in
Hammersmith.
Right at the last second. Super awesome. And shout out to Curly and Nox. I'm super jazzed to hang out with you guys this weekend. It's going to be a super dope time. That is everything. So for all of us here, stay safe out there. Don't forget to hit the head on the nail. And we'll see you all very, very soon. Adios.
Adios. Shout out to Nox's cat. I saw it roaming in the back.
You want to come here real quick, buddy? No.
Good cameo. Oh, we got the Nox cat. Close up.
Oh shoot! Is it coming?
We're getting cat delivery on stream. Hang on.
Yo.
Yes, that's the fella I saw earlier. Yeah.
Wait, I don't think it's on. Oh, here he comes. Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Now it's on camera.
Oh, what a cute cat.
Oh.
Perfect.
How old's the cat?
He turns 2 in 1 month.
Oh, he's a baby.
That's
Dang,
great.
he's a baby.
That's great.
I have 2 dogs. They're 12 years old, both of them.
Oh, they're little old ones.
Yeah, they're both old ladies.
Nice.
All right, hear me out. Pet bandanas.
Ooh.
Give it to Phan.
Hat bandanas.
Oh,
What is a hat bandana?
No, pet bandanas for like.
Oh,
something
pet
to-
bandanas. I
Yeah.
thought we did.
maybe.
Again,
we not?
Hey, new ones.
I thought we did. Yeah, I think new ones would be great. I think pet merch in general is sick.
For sure. Nox,
Anyway,
Curly, you
we
guys
were
want to sign
wrapping
off real
up.
quick?
I think we've all done our shout out, so I think we're good.
Yeah. So I
we're
said
good.
I did my adios, and now I
No,
need.
the cat interrupted the.
Okay.
I said adios, and I need.
Hold
I
on,
need
all
y'all's.
right, okay.
I need the closing
I'm
lines.
just gonna say it. I'm saying it. Peace, y'all.
There we go.
Peace, y'all. Is that your guys' closing thing?
That's good.
Usually, yeah.
Alright.